All right, folks, we've skipped a lot of the welding, grinding stuff. Now, a lot of people have asked, how do you do your sockets? And that's pretty much it. So I forge a tenon on there so I can get it nice and square. I leave a little bit of a gap because I want enough surface area. So if I leave that little shoulder there, that tenon shoulder on the body of the chisel, gives me a little bit more beef to weld to. And same thing, if I leave a little gap, we fill it in. Now, it's important to know, and a lot of people think this is cheating, that this isn't the proper. So let me put it into perspective. Say I go to fan out my chisel socket material, go to forge weld it, all that good stuff, and I can do it. I know how to do it. I'm not horrible at it, but it adds so much time, and I really don't think it adds any strength to it over this. Now, I think you guys have seen in years past, a couple of years ago, I did a video where I was torture testing this stuff with a sledgehammer and then a fence post maul. It holds up just fine. But the trick is, anneal this steel before you do it. So this is tool steel. This is 1080 high carbon steel. If I were to just take this out of the forge, nice and cool, or say it's hardened, you go to weld to it, it's not going to work very well. The weld's going to be brittle. The space where you weld it to is going to be brittle. And what we're going to do when we're all said and done with this, we're going to be normalizing this whole piece. Everything on this is going to go through 2 cycles of normalization. What that's going to do, it's going to redistribute all the carbon. It's going to refine the grain. It's going to do a really nice job making this a very, very strong piece. Now, the other step, if I didn't tell anybody I did this, nobody would know, and that's kind of what I'm going for. But if anybody asks, you can't really, BS people into thinking that you're doing everything the old-fashioned traditional way. Obviously, we sell this stuff, a lot of blacksmiths, as hand forge this, hand forge that. It's not like I'm spending the entire time making this stuff on the anvil. Can you? You absolutely can. But if you're trying to make any kind of money doing this, it's not feasible. Some people say I charged for something like this based on anvil time. Nobody'd be able to afford to buy them, and I wouldn't have the time to make them. So this is my process. Now, after the welding, after the grinding, and I get this where I want it to be, we go through and we start flattening this back out. Now, I mentioned the 3-inch slick I just made. I kind of made that curve a little counterintuitive. A lot of people kind of like it like this, but for the bigger slicks, I like just a slight curve down there, because I notice what happens when I'm using the slick a lot. I have to lift up to dig into that. But for what I'm finding, and in practice, just a very, very slight curve. Not much of one. You don't need, if you go too much, you're going to dig in, you're going to ramp down. But between a very slight curve and a very, very shallow bevel, it doesn't dig in too much. It's just right for me. Everybody has their own preferences. So, but this one, being a 2-inch, this one we're going to go the standard, very straight back, almost like a chisel. This handle is going to be a little bit shorter than that 3-inch one we just made, but it should work out pretty well. So we're going to keep grinding, all that good stuff. That 12-inch disc sander does a nice job. So what I do is I get 60 grit ceramic abrasive discs from Benchmark Abrasives. Seems to be the best ones I found so far that last quite a while. So when I want these things really flat on the back and I don't want any goofy stuff, I'll take it over to that machine. And I always test the straight edge, make sure we don't get any light coming through the bottom of it. Very important to do, because you'll find sometimes you're not putting even pressure on this stuff. So when you're using your grinder, or you're using that disc sander, you're not always doing even pressure, so you might get something a little wonky. And that's kind of a tough thing to do and to get used to as you're learning this. Goes same thing making knives, anything like that. It's tough to maintain that even pressure. So what we'll do, because the socket's swept up, that way when you're using this to pare down a big tenon or something of that nature, you're not dragging your knuckles on the wood. Now, if you guys remember when we built this shop, we had 16-inch wide tenons, 10-inch deep. So there was a lot of surface there, and I was doing it with a block plane, which is a pain in the ass. The whole idea with a slick is the slick kind of takes the place of those planes. So if you have a slick that's nice and flat, you can go through and you can work it. But we're going to keep going. Next thing we want to do, we want to lay out the width of this thing. I've got some blue dicum. We're going to get this laid out. We'll grind this carbon off the side of it, because that scale on there, it eats the shit out of all your abrasives in your shop. This stuff right here will destroy an expensive 2x72 belt fast. It'll destroy one of those expensive 12-inch ceramic discs very fast. But if you get that down to fairly bare metal, plus remember, when I'm cutting out my rough stock now, I'm using my plasma cutter, and I don't want that brittle material on the edge because it gets it pretty hot and you get the lines from it. So that's the next step. We're at a point now where we're ready for heat treatment. So when I'm doing these bevels, now you'll see, obviously I got that quite warm doing this rough grinding. Doesn't matter. We're going to normalize this. This isn't heat treated. It's not hardened. It's not like it's going to affect anything. Now the decision I have to make when I'm making this stuff, how far do I want to grind that bevel down? How narrow do I want to get that edge right there? Because if I go to almost full bevel on this, and I go to quench it, do the heat treating, I get a little wave in there. So you need enough meat. Now it's nice, it's not like it's two bevels coming to a point. We only have one single bevel, and that kind of does help quite a bit because you have a lot of meat supporting that edge. Kind of what helps make a chisel work to begin with without, ruining it all the time. So we get this very close. I have maybe a 32nd of an inch. There we go. The GoPro here, if it goes too long, never mind. So anyway, we're going to normalize this now. The rough grinding is done. We have the back nice and flat. We have this swept up where we want. So on the handle, like I said, we're not dragging our knuckles. We have the rough bevel ground in, very close to finished bevel. So let's fire up the forge, see what develops. Boy, it's windy, rainy here today, but not too bad. So I think this is a good place to end this. Next time out, we'll finish out, we'll temper, we'll get the handle on it, we'll do the final sharpening, final polishing, get the logo on there. So what we're doing right now, I'm going to run that through 2 cycles. We're going to, it's called the normalizing cycle. I explained earlier, helps even out the metal structure. It really makes a huge difference. So if I didn't do this, and I left it good and hard, the tool. Keep your mind out of the gutter there, Mike Hagdahl. Everybody knows what you're thinking. So if I'd left that steel good and hard, and I didn't do this normalizing cycle, if you were to break it, it would look like granulated sugar, the grain. Now, if I left it hard after normalizing and then quenching and snapped it off, it'd be a very nice, refined, very smooth grain. That's what we're going for. That's a big piece of steel. That's why I do it a couple of times. A lot of knife makers will do it a couple times. A lot of people use heat treating ovens. One of the reasons I like 1080 steel so much is it is so forgiving for somebody who doesn't have the fancy stuff. Now I have a lot of good tools I've made in here. Definitely not a lack of that. Things helps production a lot, but I don't have a heat treating oven, anything like that. So I'm doing everything out of the forge. Same thing when I temper. I have my option. I can temper with a blowtorch. I can temper with the oven in the house. I can temper with a toaster oven. Stuff like this, I honestly like to use the blowtorch and watch my colors. Or I could put it in the oven for, say, hour and 15 minutes at 415 to 420 degrees, a couple cycles at an hour. 6 to 1, half a dozen or the other. Blacksmiths have been tempering and heat treating without the fancy stuff for thousands of years before we got all this stuff. Anyway, hope everybody enjoyed this one. I'm getting a little more instructional on this one than we have in a long time, talking more than we have in a long time. But it's nice to do them like this once in a while. So if you're actually trying to make something like this, rather than buying it from a guy like me, here's a couple options on how you can do it. I understand some of you purists out there, or honestly, it's usually people who don't make the stuff, don't really use the stuff, will get in the comments, oh, can't believe you welded that socket on, you piece of shit, you know. Whatever, guys. Go make some of this shit yourself and tell me how you make out. I guarantee you it ends up looking like a shitty butter knife at the end of the day. But anyway, that's how I make these tools. That's my process. I keep getting better at it. It keeps getting quicker. I don't charge a hell of a lot because I'm in the learning curve still. I'm in the learning curve still. I could tell one of my favorite coworkers use his words. I guess I need to learn the same thing. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you the next time. Hopefully it's not a year down the road. Take it easy.